There is a moment almost every learner experiences, but very few ever admit it out loud. You sit in an exam room, staring at a question that looks painfully familiar. You remember studying it late at night. You remember highlighting the page. You remember feeling confident. And yet, when the moment arrives, your mind goes completely silent. This moment is not caused by laziness. It is not caused by low intelligence. It is not caused by a lack of effort. It happens because effort alone does not create memory. Most people are taught the same simple rule. If you're failing, study longer, read more pages, push harder, sacrifice sleep, repeat the material repeatedly. On the surface, this advice sounds logical. Effort should lead to results. Time should lead to mastery. But learning does not work that way. The real problem is not how many hours you studied. The real problem is how little of that effort stayed with you. You can spend 6 hours reading and still forget everything. You can feel busy, exhausted, and responsible, yet gain nothing durable from your work. This is the quiet truth no one explains early enough. Memory is not a reward for suffering. It is the result of using the right system at the right time. And the moment you understand this, something important shifts. You stop blaming yourself. You stop fearing forgetting. You stop confusing hard work with effective learning. Learning becomes intentional, focused, and finally under control. Before any technique can truly help you, one truth must be clear. Your brain does not remember information by fault. It remembers information by design. Forgetting is not a personal flaw. It is the natural outcome of how memory is structured. Cognitive science explains memory as a system with stages, first described by researchers like Richard Atkinson and Richard Schifrin. Information does not move directly from reading into permanent storage. It must pass through specific filters, and most studying fails because it ignores those filters. The first stage is sensory memory. Every sight, sound, and word briefly enters your mind, but only for seconds. If attention is weak, the information disappears instantly. This is why distracted studying feels busy but produces nothing lasting. The second stage is short-term memory. Here, information can survive for several seconds, but capacity is limited. Too much input too fast causes overload. When students cram, highlight everything, or reread endlessly, the brain drops most of it without warning. Only the third stage, long-term memory, creates real learning. This stage requires meaning, repetition, and rest. It forms slowly and strengthens over time. When these conditions are missing, memory never stabilizes. Most people fail not because they lack discipline, but because they work against their brain's design. They confuse exposure with learning and effort with retention. Once you understand this structure, studying stops being a struggle. You stop forcing information in and start guiding it through the system your brain already uses every day forward from now. Every sound, image, and word enters your brain, but only for a moment. Sensory memory is the gatekeeper of learning, and it decides within seconds what is allowed to pass and what is erased. This system exists for survival. If your brain tried to store everything you see and hear, it would be overwhelmed instantly. When you open a book, your eyes scan the words, but seeing is not the same as noticing. If your phone vibrates, if your mind drifts, if your body is tired, attention breaks. And the moment attention breaks, sensory memory closes the gate. The information vanishes before learning even begins. This is why distracted studying feels strange and frustrating. You read the same sentence repeatedly, yet nothing sticks. It feels like failure, but it is not. The problem is not understanding. The problem is that the information never entered the system. Attention is not motivation. Attention is a physical and mental state. It depends on environment, energy, and intention. Noise, notifications, multitasking, and fatigue weaken it instantly. When attention is weak, sensory memory treats information as unimportant and deletes it automatically. Strong learners protect this gate carefully. They reduce distractions, choose focused environments, and study in shorter, intentional sessions. They do not rely on willpower alone. They design conditions that make attention easier. If information does not pass sensory memory, nothing else matters. No technique, no repetition, no intelligence can compensate. Learning always begins here, at the gate. Control your attention. Memory matters. When attention is present, information does not become memory yet. It simply lands on a temporary surface called short-term memory. This space is like a fragile table. It can hold a few items, but only briefly, and only if nothing else is added too quickly. Short-term memory is limited by design. Your brain can handle only a small number of details at one time. When students try to memorize long lists, dense paragraphs, or multiple concepts at once, overload happens. The table becomes crowded and items begin to fall away without notice. This is why cramming feels intense but produces weak results. Information stays just long enough to feel familiar, then disappears. Familiarity creates the illusion of learning, but illusion is not memory. Without repetition, the brain assumes the information is not important and clears the space. Meaning is what stabilizes this fragile stage. When you connect new information to something you already know, short-term memory holds it longer. Emotion strengthens it even more. Interest, curiosity, or personal relevance tells the brain to slow down and pay attention. Repetition alone is not enough if it is passive. Simply rereading does not protect information. Active use does. Speaking, writing, or explaining forces the brain to keep the item on the table longer. Short-term memory is not a place to store knowledge. It is a checkpoint. If you respect its limits and work with its rules, information moves forward. If you ignore them, the brain quietly lets it go away. Long-term memory is the vault of the brain. It is where real learning lives and where knowledge becomes stable, accessible, and reliable. Only information that is processed deeply is allowed to enter this space, and the brain is very selective about what it keeps. Depth matters more than time. Reading something many times does not guarantee storage. What matters is how the information is handled. When you connect ideas, create meaning, retrieve them from memory, and allow time for rest, the brain begins to strengthen neural pathways. This process is slow, but it is durable. Long-term memory depends on consolidation. After learning, the brain needs silence, pauses, and sleep to organize what it received. During rest, weak connections are removed and useful ones are reinforced. Without this stage, learning remains fragile and easily lost. This is why forgetting should not be taken personally. Forgetting is not failure. Forgetting is feedback. It shows that the method used did not match how memory is built. The system was wrong, not the learner. Strong learners treat forgetting as information. They ask what was missing. Was attention weak? Was meaning shallow? Was there no recall or rest? Each mistake reveals where the process broke down. Once information reaches long-term memory, it becomes easier to access again. Retrieval strengthens storage, confidence grows, and learning compounds over time. This is how experts are formed. The vault does not open quickly, but when it does, knowledge stays. Learning stops being temporary and becomes reliable over time. High performers do not rely on repetition alone. They rely on meaning. This single difference separates learners who forget quickly from learners who remember for life. Repetition without meaning creates familiarity, not understanding, and familiarity disappears under pressure. One of the clearest examples of this principle comes from Richard Feynman, a physicist known not only for his intelligence, but for his clarity. He believed that true understanding begins only when you can explain an idea in simple language. If an explanation collapses into jargon, the knowledge is still fragile. Top learners adopt this mindset naturally. They do not study to recognize answers, they study to explain ideas. They speak concepts out loud as if someone else were listening. When words feel unclear, they stop. Confusion becomes a signal, not an embarrassment. This approach forces the brain to organize information. Speaking exposes gaps that silent reading hides. It reveals where understanding ends and memorization begins. Instead of avoiding these gaps, strong learners search for them. Comfort is passive. Gaps create growth. Meaning also comes from connection. Top learners constantly ask how new information fits into what they already know. They link ideas across subjects, experiences, and goals. When knowing feels useful, the brain pays attention. When information feels isolated, the brain releases it. At the same time, top learners understand something most students ignore. The brain remembers what it feels, not what it merely sees. Emotion is not decoration added to learning. Emotion is the accelerator that determines what stays. Think about memories that last for years. They are rarely neutral. They involve excitement, fear, pride, embarrassment, or curiosity. The emotional brain signals importance. It tells memory systems to store the moment carefully. This applies directly to learning. When a subject feels boring, memory weakens. When curiosity, purpose, or imagination are present, memory strengthens. Top learners do not wait for passion, they create it intentionally. They connect topics to future goals. They imagine using the knowledge in real situations. They turn abstract ideas into stories, images, or problems to solve. These techniques generate feeling, and feeling generates retention. Emotion also increases focus. When something matters, attention becomes effortless. Distractions lose power. Time compresses. Learning deepens. This is not motivation in the usual sense. It is alignment between purpose and action. Meaningful learning also reduces fear. When you understand deeply, exams become retrieval tasks, not threats. Confidence grows because knowledge is flexible, not brittle. You are no longer repeating words, you are expressing ideas. Top learners do not rush this process. They accept slower progress at first because they know it compounds. Meaning creates structure. Structure supports memory. Memory builds confidence. Confidence encourages further learning. This cycle explains why top learners appear calm under pressure. Their knowledge is not stored as isolated facts. It is organized, emotional, and connected. When one fails, another leads to the answer. They also monitor their thinking constantly. When something feels unclear, they pause instead of pushing forward. Reflection becomes part of learning, not an afterthought. This habit builds accuracy and prevents fragile knowledge from accumulating. Over time, their understanding becomes layered and resilient. Because meaning guides their study, they waste less energy. They know what deserves focus and what does not. This clarity protects motivation and prevents burnout. Learning stops feeling endless and starts feeling directed. Progress becomes visible, measurable, and repeatable. This is why their results seem effortless from the outside. The effort is real, but it is invested in the right places. Meaning does the heavy lifting, and memory follows naturally. Understanding, once built this way, does not collapse under stress because it is supported by logic, emotion, and experience working together as a single, stable system. That is the quiet advantage top learners carry into every learning challenge consistently. Studying longer does not guarantee learning more. This belief is deeply rooted in modern education, yet history and science quietly prove the opposite. The most effective learners across time did not rely on endless repetition or exhaustion. They relied on efficiency. timing and focus. Ancient Greek speakers did not memorize speeches by rereading scripts for hours. They used structured visualization, placing ideas into familiar locations to reduce mental load. Renaissance scholars often worked early in the morning, not for discipline, but because they understood that clarity comes before fatigue. Modern neuroscience confirms the same truth. Sleep and rest are not breaks from learning. They are active components of memory formation. Top learners study with this awareness. They understand that attention and energy are finite resources. Instead of spreading them thin, they concentrate them where results multiply. They focus on the vital few, not the trivial many. They identify core ideas, patterns, and principles before details. This allows their learning to scale instead of fragment. Efficiency begins with selection. Not all material deserves equal time. Some concepts unlock entire subjects, while others add only minor value. Strong learners learn to ask which ideas generate the greatest return. By doing so, they reduce overwhelm and increase clarity. They also favor short, intense sessions over long, draining marathons. Deep focus cannot be sustained indefinitely. When sessions stretch too long, quality declines even if effort remains. Fatigue creates the illusion of productivity while quietly weakening memory. Focused bursts, followed by deliberate pauses, protect mental sharpness. Rest is treated as a tool, not a reward. Breaks are scheduled before exhaustion appears. Silence is used intentionally. Sleep is protected, especially after learning. During rest, the brain organizes information, strengthens useful connections, and removes noise. Without rest, learning remains unstable. Top learners do not measure progress by hours spent. They measure it by clarity gained. They do not ask, how many hours should I study? They ask, what creates the strongest memory per minute? This question changes behavior immediately. Efficiency also means reducing friction. Study environments are simplified. Distractions are removed. Multitasking is avoided. Energy is preserved for thinking, not resisting temptation. This makes focus feel natural instead of forced. Smart learners understand timing. Difficult material is studied when mental energy is highest. Easier tasks are saved for later. This alignment prevents frustration and improves retention. Learning begins to work with biology instead of against it. They also review strategically. Instead of rereading everything, they test key ideas. Retrieval strengthens memory more than exposure. Mistakes are welcomed as signals, not threats. Each error refines the system. Over time, this approach compounds. Less time produces better results. Confidence grows because progress is visible. Learning stops feeling endless and starts feeling controlled. Hard learning exhausts. Smart learning compounds. The difference is not effort, but direction. When focus is applied where it matters most, memory strengthens, stress decreases, and learning becomes sustainable. This is why top learners appear calm. They are not doing more. They are doing what matters at the right time with the right intensity. Efficiency is not shortcutting. It is respect for how the brain works. Here lies the most important shift in how learning must be understood. Memory is not built by input. Memory is built by output. This idea feels uncomfortable because it challenges how most people were taught to study. Reading feels productive. Highlighting feels safe. Reviewing notes feels responsible. But none of these actions guarantee memory. Top learners understand that the brain does not strengthen what it receives. It strengthens what it retrieves. Information becomes durable only when the mind is forced to pull it out without support. That effort changes the brain physically. It builds pathways that make future recall faster and more reliable. This is why top learners constantly retrieve information. They test themselves before they feel ready. They close the book and ask what they remember. They explain ideas without notes, even when their explanations sound incomplete. They write answers from memory, then check for gaps. They speak concepts out loud, training both thought and expression. This process feels difficult, and that difficulty is not a problem. It is the signal that learning is happening. When retrieval feels hard, the brain is working. When recall feels strained, neural connections are forming. Ease often means familiarity, not understanding. Passive review feels comfortable because it hides weakness. You recognize the material and assume you know it. Active recall exposes weakness immediately. You see what is missing, unclear, or confused. This exposure feels threatening to the ego, but it is essential for growth. Top learners do not avoid this discomfort. They use it as feedback. Every forgotten detail becomes a guide. It points directly to what needs attention. Instead of rereading everything, they focus only on what failed to appear during recall. This makes learning precise and efficient. Retrieval also strengthens confidence. When you practice pulling information from memory, exams and conversations stop feeling unpredictable. You have already faced the hardest part, remembering without support. Performance becomes familiar instead of stressful. Reinforcement happens through repetition of retrieval, not repetition of reading. Each time information is recalled, the memory trace becomes stronger. The brain marks it as important. Over time, recall becomes faster and more automatic. This is how expertise forms. Speaking plays a powerful role in this process. When you speak before you feel ready, you force clarity. Words reveal confusion instantly. Vague understanding collapses when spoken aloud. This collapse is useful. It shows where thinking must improve. Writing from memory works the same way. A blank page is honest. It shows exactly what you know and what you do not. There is no illusion of competence, only truth. That truth allows correction. Top learners also space retrieval over time. They return to material after hours or days, allowing forgetting to begin before recalling again. This struggle strengthens memory far more than immediate review. The brain learns that the information must be preserved. They do not fear forgetting, they expect it. Forgetting becomes part of the training process, not evidence of failure. Each recall attempt is a workout. Each mistake is resistance. Passive review feels safe because it protects identity. Active recall works because it challenges it. One preserves comfort, the other builds skill. Memory is not created while reading. It is created in the moment you ask, "What do I remember?" and answer honestly. That moment, repeated consistently, is where learning becomes permanent. At some point, every learner must release a belief that quietly limits everything that follows. I have a bad memory. This sentence feels harmless, even honest, but it shapes behavior in destructive ways. Once you believe memory is fixed, effort feels pointless. Struggle feels personal. Forgetting feels like proof. This belief is wrong. Memory is not a gift reserved for a few. It is not talent, luck, or intelligence. Memory is a trainable system governed by rules, and systems respond to methods, not identity. When learners confuse outcomes with identity, progress stops before it begins. The moment you change how you study, your brain changes how it responds. This is not motivational talk, it is biology. Neural pathways strengthen when they are used correctly. Attention reshapes focus. Retrieval reshapes storage. Rest reshapes consolidation. The brain adapts to the demands placed on it. Confidence follows behavior, not the other way around. Learners often wait to feel confident before acting. Top learners act first, using systems that create evidence of progress. Each successful recall, each clear explanation, each calm retrieval under pressure rewrites the internal narrative. Confidence becomes a byproduct, not a prerequisite. Average learners personalize failure. They say, "I forgot, so I am bad at this." Top learners externalize failure. They say, "This method didn't work. I need a better one." This shift alone changes everything. One response creates shame, the other creates strategy. Strategy is the true dividing line. Intelligence determines potential. Strategy determines results. Two learners with equal ability can produce radically different outcomes depending on how they approach memory. One relies on repetition and hope, the other relies on structure and feedback. Top learners also accept responsibility without self-blame. They own their process, not their limitations. If something is forgotten, they adjust attention, increase retrieval, add meaning, or improve rest. They did not question their worth, they refined their system. This identity shift is uncomfortable at first. Letting go of bad memory removes an excuse, but it also removes a burden. It replaces helplessness with control. Learning becomes a skill to develop, not a judgment to endure. Over time, this new identity stabilizes. Learners begin to trust their process. Anxiety decreases because outcomes are predictable. Forgetting no longer creates panic, it creates information. Every mistake becomes useful data. This shift alone changes motivation. Studying stops being about avoiding failure and starts being about building capability. Effort feels purposeful. Progress feels measurable. Learning becomes cumulative instead of fragile. The most powerful realization is simple. The brain is not evaluating you. It is responding to input, output, and timing. When those variables improve, results follow naturally. There is no moral meaning attached to forgetting, only mechanical cause and effect. Once this identity shift is complete, learning accelerates. Time is used more effectively. Energy is preserved. Confidence compounds. The learner stops asking, "Am I good enough?" and starts asking, "Is my system strong enough?" That question has answers. Strategies can be learned. Systems can be improved. Memory can be trained. And when learners understand this deeply, learning stops being a source of fear and becomes a source of power, control, and long-term confidence that extends far beyond exams. You do not need a new brain. You need a better system built on understanding, structure, and respect for how memory works every day. Learning changes when you stop forcing information and start cooperating with biology instead of pressure, fear, guilt, and endless repetition that exhausts motivation quickly daily. When you learn how memory works, studying becomes deliberate, focused, and predictable rather than chaotic, emotional, and dependent on luck or last-minute panic stress cycles. You retrieve more than you review because recall strengthens memory, exposes weakness, and trains confidence under real conditions instead of imagined comfort, false certainty, habits. You rest without guilt because rest is not laziness, but the phase where the brain consolidates learning and makes it durable over time, reliably, again. You speak what you learn because language forces clarity, reveals gaps, and transforms silent knowledge into usable skills during exams, conversations, work, interviews, presentations, daily. Small, consistent actions replace anxiety because progress becomes visible, measurable, and repeatable through systems that work without burnout, confusion, overwhelm, pressure, excuses, delay, fear, cycles. Forgetting no longer feels like failure, but like information, guiding adjustment, refinement, and smarter decisions next time with clarity, calm, purpose, control, intention, focus, confidence. When this shift happens, learning stops being survival and becomes ownership, direction, and long-term personal advantage built slowly, steadily, intentionally, daily, over months, years ahead. That is when effort finally pays off because learning is no longer random, fragile, or temporary, but powerful, controlled, deliberate, resilient, reliable, compounding, lifelong, yours.